It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's playoff season. 16 NHL teams have made it to the postseason, and some of their uniforms are some of the most iconic in sports, while others, let's just say, they need quite a bit of help. I'm going to be ranking every single playoff jersey and putting them on a tier list. Spoiler alert, I have no mercy. Hi, I'm Megan, aka SheGotGame, and welcome to the SheGotGame YouTube channel, where we analyze, discuss, and sometimes crash out over all things sports and fashion. I have 15 years of experience as a stylist working in pro sports, so I think I am uniquely qualified to judge all of these jerseys. In this video, I'll break down the definitive playoff jersey ranking based on 3 main criteria: design and color execution. Is it intentional? Does it look good on the jersey, on the players, and on TV? Heritage and history. Do the jerseys pay homage while feeling modern? And finally, home and away. Do these jerseys work well together? And is one much better than the other? For the F tier, the first team I want to talk about is the Carolina Hurricanes. They're a team where I feel like they could really use a brand identity refresh. It kind of feels like they're circling, Hurricane. Similar ideas, but they haven't quite hit the mark. In terms of the jerseys they've worn so far, they went with the black jersey. In their Instagram post, they say, "Black of the very darkest color. Owing to the absence of or completely absorption of light, it's a warning." They have the hockey stick with the 2 flags. They also have what is kind of interesting. We haven't seen this a lot in the league is blacked out patches. So they have the North Carolina star patch in black, and then they have the Canes logo in black. I wish they would have at least done maybe a little red in the eye of the Hurricanes. There isn't even really a piping to delineate it. It's one of those things that is a cool idea, but it doesn't fully execute. The numbers are very narrow. I get it. They're trying to have their very specific typeface. It ends up just seeming a little unbalanced, especially on the players. The white jersey to me feels much more like a practice jersey. A black stripe on the arm has this weird diagonal pattern. It looks like there's some sort of texture. Some of the patchwork is interesting, but I just feel like having the stripes just be straight, these red arm patches just kind of be on a diagonal. It kind of feels like they just kind of slap some stuff together. The black numbers get kind of lost. There's no piping around it that really delineates the numbers. In terms of the heritage, obviously they could lean on the fact that they used to be the Hartford Whalers. It almost looks like they took where the sleeve color goes a bit from the vintage Hartford Whalers. If you look at it, they have those sort of horizontal stripes. They have, the stripe on the bottom, the stripe on the top, the 2 stripes on the arm. I think the black jersey is slightly better just because the white ones feel way more like a practice jersey. They need either a third color or they need some more white or silver or something like that to really make these sections pop. Love to see them redesign. I'm underwhelmed by the jerseys for the Hurricanes, but not underwhelmed by their play. It's time for what I think are one of the ugliest hockey jerseys of all time, the Vegas Golden Knights. Look, I get it. You play in Vegas. You want to have some glitz. You want to have some glam. But this kind of gold, green-based gold, to me, these are the ugliest jersey in sports. The design and inspiration point of them, it's just so crowded. The colors, to me, don't really feel balanced. Multiple different colors on the sleeve. You have black, you have white, you have red, you have gold. And then on the numbers, they have that shiny element, and they also have the gold piping. On the back, I don't know why they didn't do the nameplate with some white around, because they have white around the numbers. Like, to me, that would be a consistent part of the design language, because everywhere else on the jersey, they seem to have that. Then they have this texture element on the numbers and then white outlined. I do like the star logo. That's kind of cool. This sort of North Star with the swords, like that's kind of interesting. I think the white, if we're looking at home and away, the white is much stronger because there is a little bit more balance, right? You have white, then you have the black sleeve area, then you have gold, then you have red, then you have white. I think gold works better as a highlight, but there is also something about that material that makes it harder to work with. They're so over-designed. Like, the logo is interesting, but it definitely feels very medieval times. But there's just too many details going on, too much glitter, too many color blocks, too many weird details like on the numbers, all that texture. I think they could really benefit from paring back a bit rather than trying to fit everything in one jersey. On to the D tier. So we're going to start with the Ducks. I respect that they're doubling down on a color, because I think for a long time we saw the Ducks as like the Mighty Ducks, but it's such a bright orange. I don't like this combination of this yellow with orange and the gold and then black. And then there's some gray on their patch. Like, to me, it's just so much going on. Again, a lot of elements, right? So you have the main orange color, but then you have these golden duck's wings. Then you have the stripes being black, white, gold, and then black again. And then if you look at the numbers, there is a drop shadow, and then there's also an outline, and it has sort of that flying sort of number that I think makes sense for the Ducks. So I think that is smart. On the white jersey, you can really see it. And to me, the orange with the gold around it and then the black drop shadow doesn't look great. It's really hard to get the right shade of gold to come through like we saw in the Golden Knights. This color combination on the numbers, to me, it doesn't feel balanced. It feels like there's just too much going on, where I think if they just did orange with black, it might pop better. If you look at the gold around the numbers, right? And then you look at the gold stripe on the hem of the jersey, they look like different shades of gold. They need to learn to edit a little bit. That's definitely something I heard a lot in design school. So I get it. You want to put all these fun elements in, but it doesn't quite get there. The white jersey is a little stronger, partially because you don't have a giant onslaught of color. It almost feels like, do you remember those color rush jerseys in the NFL? It kind of feels like that with the orange. There's more visual balance here, and I think it works well. All things considered, I think they're moving in the right direction, but just in these playoffs, they're not my favorite jersey to see. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Again, I want to make it clear, I'm not judging all of the jerseys. They have another version of this sort of all one color jersey, much like we saw the Ducks in orange, with this yellow Pens jersey that makes my eyes bleed. It's just so much yellow. It's such a specific color of yellow. I know some people have called them the piss jerseys, and now that they lost to the Flyers, I think they got to retire it or never wear them in the postseason again. And it also feels like slightly different yellow than the main Pittsburgh yellow. I know it's changed a bit over the years. I also hate that the logo is just like on there. I will say I do like the little igloo patch. I'm glad that the numbers have some white around it. The white jersey is much closer to kind of the traditional Pens logo. I feel like on the white, the stripes are a lot more balanced. Well, I feel like on the yellow, the stripes are a little thin and they just have the one stripe on the bottom. The stripes work much better on the white ones, although I think they could get away with not having so many stripes and giving that penguin a little more space to breathe on the white. The white away was a lot stronger, a little more balanced, although it could use some editing. Well, I think the yellow jerseys just need to be retired. Now let's move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I realize that these are the kind of jerseys that, because the blue is so deep and saturated and it's quite similar to the Canadiens blue, it actually looks really interesting when they're playing each other. The actual Lightning logo and what they've done with it is kind of lazy. There is no real background. They're just using blue in the background on the blue jersey, and on the white jersey, I feel like you don't really get the full element of the bolt. And on the shoulders, you just have this Tampa Bay Lightning Club, the kind of old school style bolt on the shoulders, which is actually, I think, a lot more interesting looking than the main logo now. In the past, Tampa Bay has had some like interesting jerseys and they have that retro feel, but these kind of feel like a watered down version of it. The white jerseys, the bolt doesn't really stand out. I feel like they need something a little bit more on the background. I do think they've done a decent job with the numbers. I wish maybe they had two different patches on the shoulder for a little more interest. They could embrace the retro element a bit more. The bolt on the side of the legs, that's kind of the more interesting part. But there isn't really anything connecting it to the top of the jersey. It just kind of feels like two disparate elements. But the color of the blue jerseys is just so deep and saturated, and you can really see the Bolt logo more. Well, the white, it kind of just feels like there's just not enough going on. I'm bored. Next up, we have the C tier. Is all a bunch of kind of meh teams. Like, they're decent, but not that interesting, and I feel like they could be doing more. Now, the Kings are a team that also have an interesting history. Had them in the purple and gold. They've done the black, silver, and white. And these jerseys, there's something about them where it just falls flat. Now, it might be because, they got swept. This is another jersey where they're using these kind of glittery elements. I just don't think they work really well in terms of like a fabric. I feel like they don't read on television. They're usually stiffer. And from a design standpoint, I personally don't love working on them. Let's look at the white away jerseys. There isn't a lot of extra design elements. I don't see any patches on the shoulders. There's kind of that notched collar, which is kind of interesting. You have the traditional Kings logo in the silver, and then you have the stripes along the bottom. And now the stripes on the yard match the stripes on the bottom, and it kind of just feels like you build a jersey in like a custom design builder. It kind of feels like that. Like, okay, the stripes are going to be the same, logo in the middle. We're missing some patches. Like, you guys have won cups. Like, where's that celebration? The silver on the black jerseys, there is more impact when you have a color behind it. When you just have white, like we saw with the Lightning, some design elements can get lost, especially on TV because you have all this white ice. you have a white jersey, certain things aren't going to pick up as much. But the black works here because it anchors the silver. It's a classic jersey. I think if you're looking for something minimal, like maybe you like a Kings jersey, but then again, if you like something minimal, you might not want glitter. I don't know if the Kings need a full refresh, but I wouldn't be surprised if some rebrand comes soon. Now we have the Senators, who have already been swept out of the playoffs. These jerseys, again, are fine, but they're not doing a ton. They remind me a lot of the original Sens jerseys, that old school Sens logo. Between these two jerseys, again, I can't believe I'm liking another black jersey, but I think the black ones are a little more impactful because you're seeing the details more. But there's something about the stripes along the arm with the different shade of red around the numbers that bothers my eye a little bit. Maybe they're supposed to be the same red, but they look different to me, partially, I think, because embroidery versus the sublimation color of the red on the jersey. Here, I feel like they've used gold in a way that makes more sense. The gold works better when you're using it as a patch because the embroidery thread is going to be richer. There's going to be more detail. It's going to be more interesting. While on the actual jersey, when you're trying to use it as fabric, it's a different kind of fabric or you have to do a different kind of treatment and it's not going to wear as well. Here, I think it works better. I like it on the helmet. It would be interesting if they had a different kind of shoulder logo for both instead of using that same Sens secondary logo. White jersey is similar. Again, they have this two skinny stripe, one big stripe on the arms, and then the numbers outlined. The numbers on the arms are a little small, and the numbers on the back are a decent size, but the actual font is just kind of, whatever. I like that they have a contrast color in terms of home and away. They're both fine. So I think that's why they're on C. One is not way better than the other. They're both okay. Rounding out the C tier, we have the Dallas Stars. Now, personally, I am not a fan of this late 90s, early 2000s D logo. I think it works well if you use it on the shoulder patch. And what I think is interesting about these white jerseys they're wearing, they have the exact same patch of the logo, just kind of a bit of a color flip on their shoulders, but it's the same as their main crest. Why is there no extra patch? The white jerseys have the big D with the star behind it, the two stripes. I don't love that the green numbers are just on their own. There's no extra outline to really make them pop. I do like the D logo when it is on the actual map of Texas. I think that's kind of interesting, and it's sort of a way to pay homage to the state, which I think is great from a heritage standpoint. In terms of the dark jersey, which is black and green, these were kind of the all-star jersey templates where they had the star cut out. Very of that era, very mid-90s. This isn't the exact same jersey from when the Stars won the Cup in 99, but it's supposed to be kind of referential of that, kind of celebrating it. So you have the black mane, you have the Texas logo on the sides of the shoulder, a lot of silver element, and then you have the green that is more on the lower half of the jersey, around the collar and the sides. I understand wanting to reference the Stanley Cup winning team from the 90s. It definitely has that retro look. If you look on the black jersey, those numbers actually have an outline. There seems to be way more detail in this jersey than the white one. It does seem a little weird to have that and then mix it with a jersey that is much more traditional, just in the sense of having stripes on the bottom, having the colored shoulders. It doesn't seem to match together, which is interesting for a playoff team. Before we get to the B, A, and S tier, I'm hoping you'll want to come back and subscribe and maybe check out what other videos I have on my channel. We're going to be focusing on all kinds of playoff jerseys, design, style, and let me know what you want to see. Now let's move on to the B tier, and we're going to start with the Utah Mammoth, aka the old Phoenix Coyotes. They went for a total new franchise, and I feel like it makes sense because here they've gone for all new color. There still is sort of a retro big animal logo in the sense they went with a mammoth, kind of like the Coyotes. That's kind of fun. Now we talk about the two jerseys. I personally really like the mammoth logo. I like that you can see the mountains in it. I like the tusk. I feel like it makes a good impact and it scales well. I like that this color combination is not something that's as common. We are seeing more of a mix of color in the NHL as these new franchises come in, right? We're not just getting stereotypical color combinations. Here's this very icy color combination. I like the dark home jersey more than the white one. Now, I understand why they kept the white one for now, as the step down Utah jersey was the first one they had. But what I think is really impactful about their home jersey is that you have this great Mammoth logo, you have the 3 stripes, you have 2 on the bottom, you have the Utah logo on the sides. There isn't a lot going on, so maybe going forward, once they add in a few more elements, maybe some more interesting shoulder patches that can elevate. This is a team that started in 2024, and already I feel like they're really building their design language, and I feel like they're building it progressively instead of trying to do all at once. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so successful. Maybe they could have gone with white or another color behind the nameplate, and then maybe doing like blue names or doing blue outline on the name as well as the number. I think that could have popped a little bit better. White jersey, I think they're fine. I do like that you can see the mammoth on the shoulder. I think it would have been interesting if they did the mammoth on one shoulder and then the Utah logo on the other. I think the mammoth can really build a really interesting design language and culture. I don't know if they're going to bring any Phoenix elements into the fold, but so far I think they're doing a really nice job. Let's move on to the Avalanche, who, much like the mammoth, come from a previous city. This time they used to be the Quebec Nordiques. The Avalanche have had a pretty consistent design language since they landed in Denver. They've been using this really beautiful maroon, this brighter blue, this silver, and of course, white. I also love the old school Colorado C that's on the arm. It is such a striking combination of that bright blue that's much brighter, than the original Nordiques blue, but still has some of the same color inspirations. I think the silver striping on the jersey is fine. I don't know if it's really necessary. I think using it more in the logo, maybe around the numbers, would help it pop more. I do kind of miss like the Sasquatch foot. I thought that was always fun. The cutout before you get from the maroon to the blue is really interesting. Have this very specific kind of font as well. I think they could do maybe a little more silver detailing. I wish the collars were kind of full instead of this weird cut before it goes back to blue and maroon. Like, it would be neat if the silver was all the way around and it connected to the side seams a bit more. In terms of home or away, I think both are equally solid. For the final team of the B tier, I was going between the Bruins and the Sabres. I'm actually going to go more for the Bruins, not because they're bad, because they're just the same. But these ones, they're just classic. They're an original 6 team. There's not much to say other than they are very standard Bruins jerseys. You look at the white jersey, it is so classic with that big B logo. You have the yellow, the white, and the black. And I love that the black lines are a little bit smaller to kind of have this visual balance. And you see that again mimicked through the rest of the jersey. I like the little Bruins bear patch. I think the Bruins are now understanding when to mess with perfection and when not to. And I think these jerseys are very solid. In terms of the history, I think they have done a good job of updating the original. They're not that much different. I think both are strong. I just like that they're not wearing like a full yellow jersey like the Penguins. Just hard to beat original 6 histories. I'm glad they're consistent. This is a very good example of one to stay true to your team and your colors. All right, it's time for the A tier. I've moved the Sabres up because I think they've done a really good job of understanding when to bring back the retros. One of the things I love about these jerseys is we got to talk about the Buffalo crest. It's gorgeous. The white on the buffalo, it just looks amazing. The detailing is really gorgeous. When you actually look at the buffalo, you feel it like moving. You have the traditional saber. It just looks really good. And along with that little bit of red for the eye, it really pops. I do feel like when they do the blue jersey with all blue everything, it's a little overwhelming, but I think because they have the yellow stripes throughout, it kind of helps balance it. And I think the numbers on the sleeve having white outlines helps a lot. And the outline is the same width as the white that you'll see on the stripes on the arm. So the balance makes sense. And again, if you look at the stripes on the bottom of the jersey, thicker yellow, the thinner white, and then the blue kind of balances it out. So I think they've really understood proportion so well for this jersey. And again, I think it's really the embroidery of the Sabres logo that really makes it sing. If you look at the white jersey, again, it's very clean. You have the blue shoulders, the yellow small line here, not too small, but very similar to the yellow you see on the arm, very similar to the yellow around the numbers, and again, the yellow around the Sabre logo. So I think they've really understood how to balance their logo, how to balance the line weight in a way that makes sense. And I think any other jersey, I'd be like, oh, this number, like here, is too skinny. But I think the line weight and the weight of the logo, it works. In the past, they haven't always had the most consistent design language. I think both the home and away are equally strong, not perfect, but strong. And I think they've done a good job of referencing the history of bringing in the logos. Like they have the Sabre beers, I think is, helping the fact that Buffalo is playing great. Let's get to one of Canada's teams, the Edmonton Oilers. Now, I feel like the Oilers are one of those teams that does retro right. These jerseys would be great for someone who loves hockey style, but likes something that's clean. There's not a lot of extra patches, there's not a lot of extra accoutrement, different colors. It's just blue, orange, and white. Now, what I think the Oilers do really well is they understand how to balance and how to use consistent design, language, and color. So, what I mean by that, let's look at the white jersey. If you look at the blue up top, okay, you have that orange area around the collar, and then the rest of the collar is blue. Highlight around the A and the numbers, and where you have orange, white, blue. It's consistent. Then, if you look at the arms, the 3 lines blue, orange, blue, all the same weight, very similar in weight to the line around the shoulders. Again, consistency. And if you look at the blue jersey as well, you have same kind of elements. You have orange, white, blue. The numbers, orange with blue, then white. So they keep understanding how to be consistent. The numbers will always have the same 3 colors. The collars are always consistent with one main color and one highlight. They just get consistency. And I feel like this logo, it also looks great. You have a little bit of weight to the orange oil drip. Looking at this jersey, you feel this sort of retro history, but it still feels modern. It's not cluttered. Obviously, these look not completely dissimilar from when the Oilers were in their heyday, and that's obviously intentional. They pay homage, but are still modern, which I think is super important. And I love these jerseys in comparison to some of those other weird third jerseys they've done in the past. All right, now it's time for our final team of the A tier, the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, I didn't think they'd be ranking this high, but the more I look at these jerseys, the more I feel like they are doing the second criteria well, the homage, but make it modern, because these feel like peak Lindros, Leclerc, that sort of era of the Flyers. The embroidery of the main logo just looks great and really detailed. I love the color blocking with the orange and the white. It's so classic. I like how the white of the shoulder goes down along the arms, and the orange is the main of the body and the inner arm. I just feel like that balance is really nice on the main orange and black jersey. And it's similar on the white as well, with the orange coming down and the white being on the underarm and the main body. The main thing I would change between these jerseys is just I kind of miss that really blocky big A and C that we saw on the Flyers. I don't think it needs to be quite as big. I think it can be smaller, but I do miss having that outline along the C and the A. I think that would really help with popping it here. I actually am fine with them not having that original sort of black outline along the orange to the white. I think it looks fine without it. I think also because they have such a clear black collar on the orange jersey, it's not as essential. The Flyers have been consistent. I think the fact that it's so graphic works well. It looks good in scale. It looks great on gritty. And I think that's really what makes the logo come alive. And again, I feel like they've brought back the history while modernizing it. But I think both of these jerseys are really strong. I tend to like the orange one a bit better, just because when you think of the Flyers, you think of that specific color of orange. You think of those white shoulders and that sort of really graphic jersey. They are updated, retro, modern. Flyers have done a really good job. It's time for the S tier. Let's start with the Minnesota Wild, the state of hockey. The reason why I love these Wild jerseys so much is because it feels like they've really understood their identity finally, and they feel very old school hockey, but modern. What the Wild also have is just this deep green is so unique to them. What I think also works really well this jersey is the fact they use cream instead of white. I think if they used white here, it would be too stark. The green might read more dark, but there's something about the cream that balances the depth of the green with this light of the cream with the mix of specific shade of red works really well. They have balanced out the colors in a way that really makes sense. Now, personally, I prefer the green jersey just because it's so striking. Collar on the green jersey works really well, right? Because it's all green, and then you have that slight cream outline on the top of the collar. Then with the red detail and the three main stitches to make it look like an old school hockey sweater. It just really works. You have the M for Minnesota and this really nice font that I think is really interesting. And I think that helps delineate them from the original Stars heritage. These Minnesota jerseys also show that you can have some different highlight colors without it being distracting. Like you have this sort of yellow in the moon in the main logo. I think having that white jersey, you're still able to have the elements of the cream in the patches, have the green around the shoulders. You have the 2 Minnesota Wild patches. The one thing about these playoffs jerseys, they are a little busier. I would maybe switch one of the Minnesota Wild patches they have on the shoulders for the 20th anniversary instead of having it on the arm and just keeping those arm stripes clean because it can read a little bit cluttered. If they had done that same M font for the A and the numbers, it would be too much. But I think it works well because you have them in cream and then you have those stripes in cream and you have a little bit of cream on the bottom on the green jerseys. For the white, I think there is some more balance here as well because you still have the cream highlights along with little touch of that sort of yellowy gold as well as the red. Now, when I see this green, it's Minnesota green to me. They show how you can lose and then regain a team and have your own identity and have it be clear. All right, last but never least, the final jersey in our S tier. It has to go to the Montreal Canadiens. There is no more classic jersey to me, and I think to most people who have a taste, than the Montreal Canadiens red jersey. That specific shade of red. It's got a little bit of blue in it, but not so much that it's too cherry, kind of like the Canes. It's this very specific kind of red. You have the blue, you have the white. It's just such a beautiful jersey. The white is also gorgeous. I saw on Reddit, everyone was like, does everyone in Montreal have a Habs jersey? And someone was like, no, you have 3. So to me, the Canadiens jersey is a really good pair actually with the Wild because the Wild has so many patches. Well, the Habs know how to streamline the elements. Obviously, the big Canadian C with the H for hockey club, not habitant. Right there in the center, it's the scale to me is just perfect. And they have that iconic stripe behind it in the blue and the white. And that carries through on the arms. And these stripes connect, which is just perfect. I think they've done a good job too of the scale of the numbers. With the white number and the blue around, they pop without being too big or too obnoxious. It's like a good scale. You know, you have a red jersey, you'll have the white number with the blue piping. And on the white jersey, you have a blue number with some white in between and red around it. So there's a little more elements, but I feel like they work here to really anchor the number on the white without it being overwhelming. Now, obviously, on the white jersey, you don't have the stripe going all the way around the back. You still have that sweater detailing at the collar. You have the red shoulders, the slim stripes around the bottom. On the red, there's only 2 stripes. There isn't room for the white. Well, on the white jersey, you have red and blue with room for the white. Overall, I think there's few things more clean, more easy to recognize than a Canadiens jersey. To me, the number 1 is always going to be the red one. In terms of heritage, the Habs have such a storied one. The C logo in all kinds of variations. This feels like the most modern, updated way. I think I really like the stripe because it reminds me where the Habs have been with like the barber poles. The colors are so consistent between the 3 main colors, the bleu, blanc, et rouge. You'll also notice that even though there's a lot of history on this team, there's not a lot of extra patches. I like the red ones better, but the whites are very strong. But there's something about that iconic stripe around the jersey and the arms that to me really makes the logos stand out and really makes me think about the history and heritage of the Canadiens. Can you imagine if we had a Wild and Canadiens final? That would be amazing. I would love to hear if you think I ranked the teams accordingly. I know Oilers fans maybe want them to be at the top. I know Vegas fans might be mad and Pens fans. How do you really feel about those all yellow jerseys? I need to know. Do you think they're cursed? Coming up, I'm going to do a video all about the teams that didn't make the playoffs. Please like, subscribe, share, and let me know what you think. I always love to hear it. And maybe start another argument or two. I'm Megan Ann Wilson, aka SheGotGame, and thanks for watching, and I hope to see you very soon.